Hi everyone, Graham Bateson here, one of the TikTok Effect House creators. I'm going to give a quick tutorial on how you will go about creating your very first TikTok effect. Very first thing you need to do is go to Effect House, effecthouse.tiktok.com. This is the platform that allows you to build and create your effects using Logic and drag and drop components. So you actually don't need to know any coding, which is quite handy for people who may not be coming from a coding or programming background. So first thing you need to do is download Effect House. So you can click the download button and choose your options. There's also resources in here if you want to learn about, tutorials, the libraries, all the different ways in which you can piece things together. So yeah, feel free to look at that at your leisure, but let's dive straight in. So once you download and launch Effect House, you'll be presented with this type of environment. So you can see it's quite daunting for someone who may not be used to a programming styled environment. But essentially there's a couple of different main components that you need to be aware of. In the top left here is the hierarchy. So this will be how you build up your scene. So how you create elements and piece them together to position them into different orientations or different positions within your screen. The bottom left is your assets. So this is where you add all your imagery or all the assets that you want displayed within the app. The top part is your scene. So this will show you where they're all placed in relation to each other. This is specifically good when you're working within 3D because you can see the depth field and where they are. The preview window here on the right is essentially what you're going to see when you launch the app. So it's nice to be able to see what it's like and test out your interactions. The visual scripting piece is where you attach all your logic, which is essentially how you want your effect to act as people interact with it. And then on the right hand side is your inspector, which delves a little bit deeper into the details associated with each of the things within your scene. So I'm going to put together a very, very simple effect here just to show you the different components. So within Add Object, you can see that there's multiple different options here available, from pulling in your social content like all your friends, 2D if you want any kind of 2D imagery. This is what I'm going to focus on today. Scene objects if you want to add any cameras or additional lighting. 3D if you want to add any 3D objects like cubes or spheres and position them within a 3D environment. AR tracking, so if you want things to be tracked within the different movements. Anything got to do with your pets. Face effects, so if you want to do anything with like pulling out people's facial expressions or the different components of your face and position them on different parts of the scene, you can do that. Post effects, so if you want to add any additional features of functionality like distortions or different colors, you can do that. Generative, so if you want to create any AI elements got to do with like aging or changing people's hair colors or looking at facial expressions, you can do it there. And segmentation, if you want to separate different parts of the body and position them within your scene, you can do it as well. So let's look at 2D for the moment. So I'm going to use a 2D screen image just to kind of give you the basics of piecing together this. So you see when I added the screen image, it came into your hierarchy here. The screen image here, you can see it's after populating the scene because it's part of the scene. You can see that this is what it's going to look like in my preview. And within the screen image, you can see on the right hand side now the inspector is after being populated. So you can see the width is automatically defaulted to full size. Because it's a square image, you can see that it's only taken up kind of the middle part. But here you can adjust the size, you can adjust the scale. So let's adjust the scale for the moment to half the size and half the width, which means it's just positioned here on the center of the screen. Now, everything here that has a circle beside it is also possible to do within your visual scripting. So let's say, for example, you want to change the scale of this when you start. If you click the circle, you can see a get and a set. So I can pull it in a set, and you can see I have different components here. So automatically by default you have an update component with updates on every frame, and you have a start component which is run at the very start of your effect launch. So say for example if I want to connect and set the scale of this image as soon as my effect starts, I can come in here and I can change this to be whatever value I want. And you can see now within the visual scripting, I can change the scale of this while I also change the scale of this. So you can see it's set to 0.5, which is half the size originally. But when I start, I want to reduce that down to 0.2. So you can see the visual scripting overrides anything that's on the right hand side here. So within visual scripting, I can do anything I want. So say for example now I want to also position this somewhere. So again, I can just hook these up. So once I set the scale, after that, which is your next component, so these connectors here determine the order in which things are done. So I'm going to set the scale, and then when that's done, I want to set the position. So you can mess around with this and you can set the position. You can see here I'm going to go 0 on the X, which keeps it vertically aligned, but I want to position it up a small bit. So say 400, so I'm going to position it up the top. So you can see here within the visual script, and I can move stuff around. Now, your assets window. Within the assets window, it allows you to have a look at the library of elements which TikTok have created for you to stop you from needing to create your own assets. So there's a couple of things in there, and then it's the Asset Studio if you want to create your own things. But say for example, if I just want to import something, so say for example a number. So I've just imported a number 2 that I've just created previously. You can see here it has a couple of different elements associated with the resolution, the size in terms of how much space it takes, because there is an 8 megabyte limit when you're creating effects, and the type. You can also replace the asset, which is quite handy when you are associating multiple different components when you're seeing within a specific texture or specific asset. You can replace all them in one go, which is quite handy. And then you can compress these down. So you can imagine if you have hundreds of assets in your effect, you know, it might go over the 8 megabyte limit. So this compression allows you to reduce it down to different sizes. You can see there the size went from, what was it, say 4 kilobytes down to, you know, 1 kilobyte when I reduce the size. Now this also reduces the quality, so you just need to be a bit careful of that. But the good thing about this is the bigger the size of your, you know, components within your thing, you can compress them all down, which is great. So within your screen image, you can see here again, I'm looking at all the inspector things, so you can have a look at the size, the you know, the scale, the rotation, all of that stuff. But you can see down here I've also got the texture. So by default it's given this kind of template image here. But now if I want to associate the image that I've just uploaded, you can do this a couple of different ways. You can click on the screen image and you can click on the texture over here, and it'll give you a list of all your textures, which is, you can see here, once I assign that, it's gone onto this screen image, which is great. So if you have multiple different textures and multiple different components in your scene, it might be difficult to find that when you click here, because you have to go through hundreds and hundreds of assets if you have them here. So also what you can do is you can take the asset from this window and drag it across, which is quite handy, as I said, if you have multiple different assets. So now you can see that I have the image 2 here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another screen image. So I'm just going to duplicate this just for the moment. You can see here I've duplicated it with its properties, but I haven't connected it to the start. So it's only the start that has been influencing the top screen image. So I'm just going to change this to number 2. I'm going to create another one down here, and I want this to be a number, say 6, because I'm going to assign number 6 to it. For the moment, I'm going to put this back to like a default texture. So you can see there's multiple different textures here you can use if you don't have your own ones. You can have a look at like bling, you know, you can use different things, which is grand. You can also use none, which is quite handy as well if you just want to position it. So I'm going to use none for the moment. So there's an image that exists on my scene, but because I've assigned a texture none to it, it doesn't show. So what I want to do is I want this to show when I click something here. So this is quite important functionality when you're piecing together a game or some sort of 2D scene when you want interaction points. So I'm going to come into the visual scripting. If you right click on the visual scripting, you can see there's an option to add nodes and create subgraph. Create a subgraph essentially allows you to group specific components together. This is handy for when you have multiple different pieces of functionality and you want to distinguish between them. You can create subgraphs and group them all together. We're not going to do that for now, but we're going to add a node. So here, once you add a node, you can see you can have a list of all the different nodes. So there's a couple of different events that you can do, that when you click the screen or touch a specific object, or you want to do different things, you know, you can interact that way. There's logic when you want to piece things together and maybe, you know, accumulate numbers. If you want to control things, so a certain amount of times you want something to run for n number of events, you know, you can do that in here. Or if you want to check values, you can use an if. Maths, if you want to again use any mathematical equations, you can do it here. If you want to have a look at any timer functions, like at the time of the system, you can do that there. Utility, this is, you know, everything else got to do with combining different numbers together, using arrays, using your brushes or animations are all in there. Transform, this is if you want to interact with it from different points of view. So say for example, if you want to have a look at clicking and having the click element understand where you click the screen, you can have a look in there. Anything got to do with your head or your face can be positioned there. If your hand, body, any physics when you're working with 3D events, you know, you can have a look here if two items collide. Audio, if you want to add audio, you can use things in here. Scene objects, if you want to have a look at creating different scene elements, you can do it at there. Components, again, if you want to get some stuff back and do something within Visual Scripting. So if you have multiple different things and when a click event happens, you want to pull information from somewhere, you can do that there. When I say pull information, not externally through an API, but from the scene objects that you have. Any assets, again, if you want to pull anything back, components, subgraph assets, you know, there's a lot of stuff in here you can mess around with. For the moment, I want to use a screen, if I say screen image tap. So there's a screen image tap, which is essentially a component that can be used to interact when someone has clicked an image on your screen. So we have that number 2 there. So I'm going to, again here, you can click this and you can pull in your number 2. If you have multiple different scene objects, this can be quite tricky. But again, you can just pull this down from the hierarchy down here and you can see a number 2 associated. So when I click the number 2, something is going to happen here. And again, this green little arrow says action next, which means once it's tipped or once it's touched, I can do something. So what I want to do is actually set a specific texture on this, right? So because it's set to be none at the moment, it just sits there and it's not visible. So what I want to do now is I want to upload another image. So I call this number 6, so I'm going to upload number 6 here. So you can see here I have number 6. So again, as I said, once I click number 6, I have access to all the different properties, including the texture. Because it has a circle beside it, it means I can set it through the Visual Scripting. So I'm going to pull it down here. You can see if I connect these together, when I click number 2 now, you have this little white circle beside an action event or an interaction point. When I click this, you can see that it went blue. That means that it's connected correctly and it's working as expected. So when I click number 2, something happens, right? But you can see what's happening is now I'm just setting it to what it always has been, which is the value none. So when I click number 2, it comes in here, it performs an action on the number 6, but I'm setting the value to be none. So again, what I can do is I can pull across number 6 here. So now once I click this number 2, it means now it's going to come in here, it's going to set the texture of number 6 to be the 6th. So you can see, so that's your basics now of setting this up. Once you you can put in elements, you can add textures, and then you can interact with it in terms of how you want it to perform. So that's the very first tutorial in terms of just having the most basic piece of functionality, you know, creating something that's just very interactive in terms of clicking something and something else happening. Now, there's multiple different things you can do here. You can move things as well. So what I want to do now is, you know, just do something additional, right? So you might want, when something is clicked, you don't want anybody to be able to click it again. So what I can then do is, on number 2, I want this to disappear because I don't, once I action it, say for example, I don't want it to happen again. So again, I come into my nodes and I know that there is a visibility node. So there's a set visibility, which means I can turn something on and off, right? Which means I can make it visible or invisible. So once I click number 2, I set the image down here to be number 6. I want then this number 2 to disappear. So that's just a piece of functionality that I've just decided I wanted, and I don't want anybody to be able to click the button once it's already clicked. So you can see here again, once I click number 2, it's coming in to each of these, you can see the blue dots on the set texture, and you can see the blue dot on set visibility. That means it connected properly, but the target is none at the moment, so I haven't assigned it to any specific target. So I want the number 2 to disappear. So now what should happen is when I click number 2, the image number 6 appears and the number 2 disappears. So that's how you interact and remove things and add things to your scene. So that's tutorial number 1, basics of putting together assets into your scene and interacting with them and adding and removing things. So stay tuned for number 2, and we'll advance this a small bit and introduce you to some additional features.